Maria had hidden her pain for many years, until her work was stolen by a colleague who dared to take credit for her achievements. But what happened next would shock even the most seasoned. Let's start from the beginning. Maria sat at her desk, her eyes squinting as the final project report was sent. She knew this report was the result of long nights of effort, every number and word carefully considered. But as always, her accomplishments remained in the shadows. Her office was devoid of awards or glory, only the harsh reality. Her contributions at work were rarely recognized. She could feel it. As soon as she sent the document, Maria noticed Christina, her colleague, with a restrained smile, already opening her report on the screen. Christina was young, white, and always appeared calm and confident. Maria was sure Christina was hiding something. And a few minutes later, when Christina approached the manager with the same report, slightly modified, with phrases taken directly from Maria's documents, her suspicions were confirmed. Christina happily praised herself without mentioning where the main ideas came from. Maria gritted her teeth. Her efforts had been stolen, and the praise was not hers. But she couldn't just lash out at her colleague. Instead, she returned to her desk and began preparing for an important meeting in a few days. All the while, she felt the hidden gazes of her colleagues on her, as if they thought she didn't deserve her position, as if her persistence was just a quirk. In those moments, she mentally repeated to herself, "Never give up." But increasingly, she felt that her persistence was unimportant. The difficulties had piled up, and it was hard not to feel like she was still an outsider in this world. A world that, thanks to people like Christina, maintained the status quo. Recognition had always eluded her. A few days later, when Maria received a message announcing the appointment of a new manager, she froze. It was unexpected. Almost unable to believe her eyes, she read the letter carefully. She had been appointed the head of the department. This wasn't just a promotion. It was a complete change. She would now be in charge of the entire team, and she could no longer leave her efforts in the shadows. Her colleagues, especially Christina, didn't know that Maria was now the leader, and her power in this position was indisputable. But Maria knew. This new role was just the beginning. She stood up from her desk, unable to contain a smile. And in that moment, when her life seemed to rise to a new level, her inner unease only grew stronger. Someone would have to answer for everything. On the day of the meeting, Maria stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her sharp suit. It was her first day in her new role, and she felt the gaze of everyone on her. The entire office knew she had just been appointed head of the department. But they didn't know that now, in her hands, she held not just power, but the decision she was about to make. At the last moment, she had no doubts. Everything had to be done with fairness. When Maria entered the conference room, her colleagues fell silent. Christina, as always, sat next to the management with a smug smile. Her eyes were shining. She had no idea that Maria already knew about her manipulation with the report. Christina raised her hand again and began talking about her ideas, smoothly transferring others' thoughts into her own words. Maria could stay silent no longer. The scene replayed in her mind. Christina taking her report, stealing her ideas, and boldly praising herself for someone else's work. This moment became a point of no return for Maria. She could no longer ignore it. "Excuse me, Christina," Maria interrupted her, her voice even but firm. All eyes turned to her. Even the management was slightly surprised. "Let's go back to the report that was submitted on Monday. You can see that there are several remarks made by me. You also used these data without mentioning who proposed them." Christina turned pale. Silence hung in the air. She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked, but her voice was no longer as confident. Maria didn't hesitate. She pulled out her laptop and showed on the screen the same lines that Christina had presented as her own. Literally every word was exactly the same. Christina tried to defend herself, but her excuses sounded absurd. Suddenly, the phone rang. Maria looked at her phone, and her heart skipped a beat. A new message from management. "Congratulations, you've been appointed the new head of the department." She closed her eyes, trying not to reveal herself. This moment was the culmination of her struggle. She was no longer just a colleague. Now she was the most important person in the room. At that moment, Maria realized that her entire life up until now had been a series of steps to reach this day. Her voice sounded firm when she said, "I am no longer just a senior analyst. I am the new head of the department. And if anyone here wants to continue their career, they need to respect the work of others." When the meeting ended, Christina quickly left the room. Maria remained in her seat, feeling something inside her break. This was not a victory. This was the moment when she took control. After the meeting, Maria felt the weight of a new reality crashing down on her. Colleagues who had previously held a restrained respect for her now looked at her differently, with caution. She had become the leader, but this didn't mean her place was secure. Maria knew that with this status, the real struggle was just beginning, not just the workplace injustice she had been dealing with. Her actions would be scrutinized, and she would have to prove to everyone that she deserved this position. The next morning, when she entered her office, Christina was already standing at her desk. She held a report in her hands and smiled with clenched teeth. "Maria, we discussed your outburst at the meeting with the colleagues," she began, tilting her head slightly. "You probably didn't understand, but I meant that I just double-checked your data to make sure everything was perfect. You know how it is, right?" Maria suppressed a nervous laugh. This manipulation, "I just double-checked," was now too obvious. Christina was trying to play the role of the senior and spin it as just an ordinary misunderstanding. But Maria was ready for it. "Christina, that wasn't double-checking. That was stealing someone else's work. I saw everything," Maria said coldly, not hiding her emotions. "And I haven't forgotten who you are." Christina fell silent, but her eyes betrayed her rage. But Maria wasn't stopping. She set the report aside and fixed her gaze on Christina. "We will continue working on the project, but now it will be according to my rules. If you can't work honestly, it will be obvious, and the consequences will be severe." Christina quickly glanced at Maria's new position and left, leaving her alone with her thoughts. At that moment, Maria understood that this was just the beginning. The real fight for respect would start now. Her position at the top had to be solid, and she couldn't allow anyone to doubt her decisions. That same day, she sent all the documents and the project she had prepared for discussion at the department-wide meeting. Every step, every word mattered. There was no time for doubts. Maria felt her confidence growing with each decision she made. At the meeting, she did everything right. The documents, the presentation, the statistics, all were flawless, and her colleagues couldn't argue. Christina tried to say a few words, but she couldn't steal the attention. When the meeting was over, Maria noticed a few colleagues quietly discussing her new leadership. No one dared criticize her, but everyone understood that now she was not just a colleague, she was a mentor, and the one who would punish mistakes. There was a sense of confusion in the air, but Maria was certain that her actions would make them respect her decisions. The next day, Maria sat at her desk preparing another report for the management when she received a phone call. It was an urgent request from the CEO. "Maria, we need to meet. The data analysis project urgently needs your attention." She knew this was her chance. The meeting with management was the final step that would decide who among her colleagues deserved trust. Christina had been trying to prove her worth at the last meetings, but Maria felt that she had already crossed the line. It was time to act. When the meeting started, Maria raised the issue of discrepancies in Christina's reports and her direct plagiarism of Maria's work. At first, there was silence. Everyone in the room looked at her in surprise, but Maria was certain that now, as the leader, no one could ignore her. "Dear colleagues," she began, "I cannot stay silent. We all saw how one of the reports was rewritten at the last meetings, not as an updated version, but as someone else's work. I'm talking about the report presented by Christina, in which my data was used." The room fell silent. Christina immediately turned pale, her hands clenched into fists. She tried to say something, but no words came out. Maria continued, "I prepared all the material used in this report, and I can show the exact dates when this project was completed. All this data is mine. I want to explain that I am committed to transparency, fairness, and hard work, and I will not let anyone undermine that." After Maria's statement, there was a long pause. Finally, the CEO nodded and said, "Thank you for your honesty, Maria. We will look into this matter." At that moment, Maria knew she had made the right decision. She had gained not just a leadership position, but the respect she had been seeking all these years.